Producer, director, executive, Asif Zubairy. Okay, well, the next one I'm going to ask you about is Hell's Kitchen.
Oh, right. I wasn't expecting that.
What was your role on that?
I think an edit producer, with those kind of shows, you work very closely with the editor. And there were certain editors that did really well. And it was people who, quite old school in a way. When I was a researcher, we used to work with editors who had crossed over from film. So their mentality was, they were used to working on Steenbecks, and but it wasn't just the technical things that they'd had to learn, and they mastered them to a varying degree of proficiency.
The Franken grab didn't exist in those days.
No, and the thing is, what they did bring with them, these old school editors that we were working with when I was a researcher, was they brought that mentality where they had worked on projects, usually documentaries, where the producer or the director had first of all said to them, "Here are the rushes. Take 3 weeks to view all the rushes and see what you can come up with." Because that's what used to happen in the olden days. Because editors were regarded as storytellers, not button pushers, and so they brought that mentality with them. And in a way, a lot of those reality shows, the people who do best in those reality shows, have that old school mentality of telling a story. So you'll find that, for example, there's I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, has made the careers of some editors who would, under normal circumstances, just happily be punching buttons. But actually, the good ones who get booked again and again and again are ones who can see rushes. And on those reality shows, the amount of material being generated is enormous. You've got 16, 32 cameras pretty much shooting all the time. The thing about reality, any reality really, is you impose a framework on the cast, and then you have to step back and watch what happens. And the rules, the framework could be, you can't touch the ground, or you have to do it upside down, or it all has to take place underwater, or whatever it is. But the beauty of reality is that you impose the framework, you explain what it is at the beginning, then you step away and watch what happens when people have to work within that framework. So for Hell's Kitchen is a good example. As a producer, you can't be going in and out, whispering to Gordon, or even in his ear. Tell him to use more salt, or tell her off for running in the kitchen, or whatever that. You can't do that because it'll just interrupt the flow, it'll annoy the host, or it'll mess up the storylines. And the thing is that I think the audience, particularly these days, are quite cynical. They know when producers are producing things. Yes. So you want there to be as much spontaneity and realness as possible. So with Hell's Kitchen, an edit producer, and there were lots of us working in little. They were curtain booths because we had everything took place in a huge open plan warehouse kind of a space. So the kitchen was over there, and then there were lots of blacks, basically, black drape, thick, heavy studio-based curtains. And
so you were actually in the venue.
Yeah. But it was so big, and the curtains helped block off the sound. And also we were quite quiet because there were, I can't remember, there were 5 or 8 different little edit suites that we were all working in, and we were all doing the same thing, which is we were being given material that we then had to look through and try and create a story from. And what I was saying to you earlier is that what was a big help was having editors who had kind of the mentality of looking at patterns or dialogue, similar types of dialogue, and being able to have an idea to construct a story of so-and-so's having problem making their, or whatever it is, things that can happen. But you have to see a pattern and then be able to try and add dialogue or shots that back up that storyline. So you were able to create a 3-minute storyline item that they can then either put together with other things, down with the next edit suite, or as just to link into it, play it, back ref out, and go on to something else. So that's what I was doing in relation to Hell's Kitchen, was trying to find stories amongst. Usually they'd come in as a quad split, so you were looking at 4 different cameras of the same item if you were lucky. But you could have 3 or 4 different items that you had to cut, or you could partly cut them and leave them, park them in a bin, and then maybe come back to them later on or the following day, whatever. It's reality when you've got that many cameras and it's a rolling format. It's very industrial. I mean, TV is the industrial end of creativity at the best of times. But for a reality show where you've got multi-camera stuff, lots of different locations going on, it's a logistical task as much as a creative and editorial one.
Right. Speaking of which, what was your role on Big Brother?
I did the Australian version of Big Brother. It wasn't on the main show. It was a new spin-off show that the franchise, by way of enlarging the franchise, Endemol as it was then, had piloted in Germany a spin-off of the main Big Brother show. The thing about Big Brother is it's very front-end loaded, in as much as it costs a lot to build a house, to design all the camera runs, to install all the cameras. So all of your costs are front-end loaded. So you've then got and then your staffing costs are huge, because it was in the days before unmanned cameras. I mean, there were some unmanned cameras, but largely you had to have camera ops in very dark, narrow camera runs surrounding the main rooms, and they had to be operated by real people. So, as an economic model, you have to generate as much material as possible to be able to amortize all the costs that you have paid. So everybody who buys the franchise is always desperate to either play a lot of episodes or a lot of long episodes, so their running costs come down. So you get so if you can make a 2-hour version, then that reduces your cost of if you only played a 1-hour version. Anyway, Germany had the franchise, Big Brother franchise, and they decided they were going to do a spin-off in that they would play kind of physical games and have physical challenges with their inmates, contestants. So Australia wanted to do that, and I managed to get a job there. When we were kids, we used to love watching some of these physical challenges, and there was a show that was actually, as I later discovered, it was a French show that basically pitted towns against each other in a series of humorous physical challenges. And that's what I kind of took that, and we loved it as kids. That's what we used to watch, and we loved it. And it would be, it involved gunge or water or people slipping or sliding or throwing things or, all that kind of stuff. So I just remembered a lot of the games that I'd seen. I included a lot of things that I'd been watching since then, like Japanese game shows, and stuff like that. And I incorporated as many ideas as I could. And we had a brilliant art director who was just one of those people. I can't remember his surname now. David. He was one of these people who could make anything. So I would say to him, can you make a frying pan that was big enough for a person to put their head through, that would keep any liquid out, with a handle on it that they can try and catch eggs in that are being thrown over a wall? And he'd go, what he should have said is, shut up, you idiot. No, of course I can't make, no one can make that. What he said always was, yeah, okay, I can do that. And he always did. So we had, the man made 7-foot high sponge penguins. He made, he made whatever. I said, you know those old World War One German helmets with the spike on the top? Can you do a helmet with a longer spike on the top? And he was like, yeah, I can do that. As a team, we would have these ideas, and this poor man would would make it. And so we did that, but we tested them out in a car park in the back of the compound of the Big Brother compound a few days before, just to make sure that the idea wasn't too mad or dangerous. We would get students from a nearby technical college to do it, and the only problem was about that is what I learned really early on is that even if you pay volunteers to do it, they don't have that competitive drive. So for timings, well, a good example, the first one was we had gotten hold of the first few. Remember those segways? Those electric that you stepped up on, and you right. So we got some of those. So I said, let's have a game where you have to pop some balloons on a line. You have to drive the Segway, and you've got a helmet on with a pointy thing. You have to break the balloons, and the balloons are full of water, obviously. So you break them, and then there's all water. Everyone's laughing and all that kind of stuff. So we did that with these students, and they did it. They took a long time to do it. It was a live show, so and obviously, timings are really important. I had no idea going into that show what the timings would be, what I had to allow on the running order. So it was often quite difficult. We were very lucky. So that game I'd allowed in real life, about 9 minutes for it. Went for about 17, which messed up my timings later on. But that's what you learn to do when you're producing live shows. But it was funny stuff. It was called Big Brother Friday Night Live, and it involved all the housemates
with Ryan and Bree.
Bree, yes, exactly. And Mike Goldman hosted, and it was lovely. And I played Mike some clips from the show that I'd watched as a kid, and I said the commentary needs to be very light. But the thing that was most enjoyable was the fact that the commentators were laughing. Basically, because so just like we were at home, they were laughing as well. So I said, so if you want to, you can enjoy it. You are allowed to enjoy it. So don't play it as a sports thing. Play it as a fun game. And luckily it worked. And we managed to. I'll tell you what the big problem was as a producer. The big problem was giving the housemates the rules while still maintaining the whole conceit, which is that there's no contact. So they couldn't have contact with the. I had handheld cameras in the arena. We had a special arena. So I had cameras on PEDs in the corners, and that was out of the compound. But I had one or two handhelds that were in the compound. So we had to explain to the camera ops, first of all, whatever the housemates ask you, you can't interact with them at all. So if they say, do I have to put this on first? You can't tell them. And so we had to so Big Brother's voice had to explain all the rules, but there couldn't be any real dialogue. So you had to try and give all the rules in a simple way that they wouldn't forget. Yet the games all had to be simple to understand and simple to do, because what you couldn't have is in the middle of a game, someone dressed as an enormous penguin going, well, I had to carry the bucket or leave it there. You couldn't have any questions like that, because again, you couldn't have Big Brother having a conversation, because he was not that kind of a character. He was a big, scary, omnipotent presence, not somebody you'd have a chat with like in the pub. Is that all right to do that? You can't do that with Big Brother. So there were lots of kind of editorial issues about it that we had to overcome.
Okay, dancing on ice.
It relied largely on people remembering fondly and loving Torvill and Dean, Christine and Jane Torvill. And I have to be honest, before I did the show, which had done amazingly well in the UK where it first started, the first series finale did, I think, 13.8 million. It was a big deal, and so the hope was that it would do, even half of that. A tenth of that, I think, would have been everyone would have been happy. So Channel 9 made it in Australia, and up until that point, I don't think I'd ever watched an ice dance in my life. So we started it, and the once you cast it, everybody has to have a lot of practice and rehearsals before you go near a camera. So everyone had about a month to rehearse, And one of the first rehearsals was a get to know you thing. Chris and Jane would meet all the cast, have a look at them skating on ice, and recommend and have an idea about what they could do and who they should be paired with and all that kind of stuff. And so first of all, I saw the cast. We met at an ice rink, and we saw some of the cast. And the cast had in the previous month, before they even got on the ice, they had to have their feet measured and have bespoke ice skates made. They had to have physicals and sign loads of waivers and all that kind of stuff. And then they had to go on the ice, and they were like I was like. I never put on a pair of skates, but every time I had to cross over the rink to talk to somebody on the other side of the thing, I was like an egg on legs. So it was very uncertain at best. And so I definitely was never going to criticize anybody. But so I saw, and I was watching. We had to. It was in an open ice rink, so there were members of the public skating and doing their thing and all that kind of stuff. And they were doing their thing, and then one by one, very anxiously, the cast would come on, have a little bit of thing. Chris and Jane was over there standing on the thing, and then they had a bit of a warm up themselves. I could suddenly tell the difference between a pretty good skater, because I'd seen they were little kids and they were spinning around, and they saw kind of like big grown-up men and ladies, and they were enjoying themselves and all that kind of stuff. And I'd seen our cast kind of like, whoa, all that kind of stuff. And then I saw these two, and even if I didn't know who they were, there was just, I don't know, it was just the sound of them on the ice was different to everybody else. And it was like they were so sure on the ice, on this ridiculous surface. It was just like they'll never slip over or fall, and it was just their confidence. And this, like I say, it was the sound that I most remember. It was just different to the way they were moving over the ice. It was just breathtaking. You just thought, righty-o then, that's what an Olympic champion does. And I presume it would be the same in any sport. Anyway, so we made it, and it was a nightmare, in fact, because we had two quite major accidents. It's in the nature of it that it's always, there are always injuries. But I remember getting in touch with London, with the first producers of the first series, and saying to them, "Are we doing something wrong?" Because I had one of the cast broke their ankle, I think it was, and the other one was a cricketer who basically cut one of the tendons of his wrist, which is, and being a cricketer, these things are quite important, I think. I'm no expert, but so he injured that quite badly, and it was so I said to London, "Are we doing something wrong?" Because we had nurses and medical team and all this kind of stuff. We'd followed their advice about rehearsals and how to mitigate against accident and all that. And they were like, "Nope, you're just unlucky." And I was like, "You're telling me?" When I came back to the UK, I was involved in a show that was a spin-off show to Strictly Come Dancing, Dancing with the Stars, as it's known. We had an injury on that. It Takes Two. We had an injury on that. And I remember talking to Australia about the Australian version. And they said to me, if we get an injury on Dancing with the Stars, they have to go on. And even if they stand there and the dance partner dances around them, that's what it has to be. Even if they're not able to dance for medical reasons or insurance reasons or whatever, they still have to, they stay in the show, they come on, they stand still on crutches or whatever the situation is, and the dancer dances around them, and that's it. And if they get loads of votes, they stay in, and if they get the least amount of votes, then they go out. And the BBC version was exactly opposite. It was no matter what the contestant says, and so I had an injury that somehow involved. It happened at a time when it involved the spin-off show, and so I was like, I spoke to the health and safety people and the medical people and the insurance people and all that stuff, and they said, no matter what the contestant says, and the contestant was like, listen, I want to go ahead and do it. I think I can do it. I know it was like a sprained ankle or something like that, but they were like, I want to go ahead and do it. And I was advised by the health secretary, whatever the contestant says, if the medical people say they can't do it, then they're not doing it. And you have to tell the audience, which we did, and they either kept them in. I can't remember. I can't remember if they stayed in or if they had to step off the show, and so we didn't have an eviction that week. But that was the problem with Dancing on Ice. It was fairly accident-wise. It was quite unlucky.
Well, hopefully a show without injury. The Biggest Loser.
I wasn't involved in the Daily Show. I was only involved in the
Finales.
in the finale. So I had been brought on because I think the finale was going to be live, and because of things like shows like The Big Breakfast and other shows that I had made, and partly because of Dancing on Ice, I've been involved in a lot of live programming. Live programming, as you know, it is stressful, but actually it's I think it's quite rewarding. And I like doing live programming because the most important thing is to stay calm, and I think I am a reasonably calm person, so I don't mind doing live. And I'm always anticipating to what happens when that goes wrong. What will we do towards the back end of the show? All that kind of stuff. So I hadn't been involved in all the run up, the daily stripped version, and all that kind of stuff. Production wanted a different set, and I'd been talking to the set designer, and one of the things he said was, "We've got, I don't know why, but all the contestants were shot in exactly the same way, walking towards camera at the start of their journey.
Yes.
So we've got all that footage that has never been used." And I said, "Well, why was it made?" And he said, I don't know, but they did it to all of them. So I knew that we had footage, the before footage. And there was a show that I had seen called The Swan, where they showed a transition of before and after of people. And The Swan was much more extreme because it involved some cosmetic surgery, and it was much more about that, about changing people. So the change was quite big, but they still had footage before and after. And of course, that's what you want to know, especially if you haven't been watching every day or even at all. It's quite a quick way of saying, this is what they look like at the start of this whole thing, and now how can we show them what they look like now? And the answer was, so we had those doors designed, didn't we? There were screens that we were able to project them walking towards us as they used to be, and the screen would open, and there would be the reveal of what they look like now. And so it was quite a nice way of doing the before and after introduction. So they walked on, and you shot it so you could move across the before footage, and then we started to encourage them to look at themselves before, and then here I am now. Look at that. See, I would be the before, but I'd be the before part. You'd be the after part. But it all, and we were able to do that on camera. And of course, in the studio, the studio audience wouldn't have seen that unless they looked up onto the monitors, which we probably encourage them not to do. But of course, it's all about people at home. So we were able to get our cast before, the after cast, looking at the before cast, going, yeah, I'm pretty happy with myself with that, and all that kind of stuff. And so we did that, and I think it was regarded as quite a good way of doing the reveal. So, and I think it did quite well, and I think they copied it. I don't think I did the second series. I tend not to do second series. I don't know why. It's not that I don't get invited back, but I think they used it subsequently because it is quite a nice way of doing it. It was a nice example of teamwork, because I can't think of a time when the set designer would have an editorial idea that would get used so successfully. And I think it was so we had you as the director going, yeah, you know what you could do? I can shunt them that way, do that kind of stuff. It was him saying, I would never have thought of that. I did that reveal if I hadn't known that they had that before stuff. So it felt like certainly the three of us were working really to good effect, bringing our ideas to the whole show.
I'm going to ask you about what I believe is your favourite program now, Nerds FC.
Ha! Right, nobody saw this because it was on SBS and nobody will know about it. But I was working for Fremantle at the time. I can't remember why. They had licensed this Danish format. And the log line is basically this. It's take 11 self-confessed nerds who've never kicked a football in their life, give them 3 months and the services of a professional coach, and see if they can beat a professional team at the end of the 3 months. And that's the log line. So there it is. So it's people go on a journey and all that kind of stuff. So it has a lot of the standard kind of reality tropes. But the reason I like it, so nobody's beastly to anyone. There's no eliminations. It's a very heartwarming show because so you stay with the same people all the time and you watch them and they do actually genuinely go on a journey. So we cast it. Mostly it was students, in fact. And we cast it, and these people had genuinely never kicked a football. And you could tell that. You know how you can tell someone who's never thrown before? They kind of throw in a way you think, I don't think you've ever thrown a ball before. These students, they said, so I had the casting. I had a casting call and got them to dribble a football and all this kind of stuff. We were able to choose 11 men, and it was quite obvious that they'd never kicked a ball because you'd throw the ball at them and it would hit them in the face, or it would hit them in the knackers or whatever, and they'd be like, oh. Or you'd say, right, it's a throw in now, and they'd be like, what does that mean? And I'd say, right, okay, it's when it goes off the edge past the lines marking the edge of the pitch. You're allowed to pick it up then, put it behind your head, and throw it anyway. So it was all that sort of stuff. And so in the beginning, it starts off with loads of sight gags, of them, getting hit and tripping over and falling down and all that kind of stuff. The dialogue in it was brilliant because these were all kind of students. And so they were intelligent guys. They just weren't sporty guys, but they were able to articulate their feelings of learning this new sport. A lot of them were kind of like computery kind of maths kind of guys. So they were used to working on their own, whether it was studying for their PhD, or some of them were developing kind of new touchscreen kind of things that was new at the time. And so they were used to working on their own, but they weren't used to working as a team. And so suddenly now they all had to wear the same gear. They had to elect a captain. So there were loads of quite subtle, nuanced things going on. And you watch these guys go from nerdy, unsporty people to just a team of people who got to know each other and learnt different things. One episode the episode starts with the coach going, right, in a couple of weeks' time, you're going to be playing a professional team. I can tell you, as an ex-professional myself, the first time you play a game in front of a big crowd, it's frightening. You need to get used to the catcalls and the kind of like the cheering of the crowd and the expectations and all that kind of stuff. It's frightening, and I want you to get used to that. So what I've arranged to happen is you are going to play a prison football team. So let's get into the coach now. And they're all like, this genuinely was news to them. And they were like, and I'd said to the crew, and there was, we had a good relationship with the cast and all that sort of stuff. But I said, for Christ's sake, don't say where we're going or what we're going to do, because I want to see their faces when they hear, yes, lads, we're going to play a prison football team. So we went out to the prison in West Sydney that we'd lined up. They had a prison football team, obviously, and a football pitch and all that kind of stuff. So when we shot them and the boys are walking in, of course it's the first time in the prison, and it's with the barbed wire and the big fences and all that kind of stuff. So we got loads of reaction shots and all that. And I said, right, you lads go and get changed and all that. I'll just go and speak to the other team. So I went into the prison gym, which was kind of like that movie gym. All those blokes were all pumping iron. They were big, hench or whatever the word is, blokes. So I said, gents, can I just have your attention for a minute? And some of them looked like, I'm not lying, a particularly vicious robber's dog, right? They were really mean. And I said, right, lads, I explained who I was and what the show is about. And I said, listen, I don't want you to let them win because it'll be obvious. So just play your game, but just don't kill them. Don't foul them and hurt them and all that kind of stuff because they're only. And at the end of the day, it's only a TV show. And they were all right. And I found out later that about 4 of them were in for murder. So when I said to them, "Don't kill them," some of them might have taken it personally. I don't know, but anyway, they were very good, and they didn't foul them. But they didn't let them win, and they won. At the end, the prison team won. I think there's some of them are still mates to this day, and that was, I don't know, 20 years ago. So it was, so like I say, it was a lovely. It was reality when reality was huge. So it satisfied that imposer framework, blah blah blah. But it was a nice one, and so it was lovely to make because it was funny, it was heartfelt, there was some nuance in it, and it was lovely to make.
In many of these shows you've spoken about, you've been a producer or director, but here's a few executive positions that you have filled: Director of Programs, Paramount Comedy Channel, Director of Original Programming, Disney Branded TV, Head of Entertainment, Nine Network, ITV Commissioning Editor. Interestingly, having held all these positions on the other side of the desk, you've now retreated to quite a life and given up the pitch. Why is that?
First of all, I think the nature of TV has changed a lot. First of all, the commercial model is different to the way it used to be. In the olden days, you used to pitch a show and hope that a broadcaster would greenlight it and you'd make it. And if you were the owner of the IP, you'd get your share. If you were the production company making it, you get your production fee, and that's how people make money, and that's how it goes. And that model seems to have shattered, because nowadays most people can try out their ideas on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, and some of those things transfer to TV. In my experience, not terribly well. But the way people watch TV has changed. My feeling is that mainstream linear TV is becoming older, so the formats are geared more towards older people, and even stuff that does well has to have like family appeal because the largest portion of the audience is going to be older. So talent shows do quite well, but the assumption has to be that obviously the older people will be there, but will their kids come with them and that they can talk about who's a good singer and who's a bad singer, and will the kids help the older people navigate the app to be able to vote and all that kind of stuff. Also, my feeling is that it's becoming more difficult to pitch shows because everybody's getting more and more risk averse. I know I discovered that Australia was very, very reluctant to take paper formats. So if you were trying to pitch a new idea, unless it had been made even in markets like Bulgaria or Indonesia, no disrespect to any of those markets, if it hadn't been made elsewhere, you almost definitely would never sell it in Australia. And when I worked at Channel 9, they used to tease me and say, "Geez, you Poms, you know how to sell a format, don't you?" Because Australia were pretty much at that time were only taking UK formats. If it wasn't Got Talent, it was Dancing on Ice, or it was. And I said to them, "Yeah, but the reason is because in the UK, broadcasters are more likely to take a chance with a new format." And sure, most of them don't work, but the ones that do, yeah, well, they get flogged worldwide, and they either make it or don't make it. So I worked in Australia for, I think it was 4 years. And then I came back to the UK and I discovered that the UK had become a lot more risk averse as well. And I was really, I was surprised / disappointed, because what it means if you don't try new formats, what happens in the short term is everybody gets to keep their jobs, and that's great. But in the long term, what it means is you run out of new shows because nobody's tried out the stuff that only existed on paper. And that's when the trouble will happen. And that's what's happening, I think, now, is that you're getting the same shows being sold worldwide, but nobody's trying out any new shows. And the only people who are doing that are online. I was on the periphery of a disaster. Somebody came to us. It wasn't my show, but it could well have been, and said, "Look, YouTube has got all these kind of crazy, lovely, interesting, different clips going on, your audience might not know how to navigate YouTube and look for these things and all that kind of stuff. Not nice things, not porn or anything like that, but I don't know, dogs on skateboards or that kind of stuff. So this production company said, what we'll do is we'll curate that for your audience. So we'll collect all these online stuff. And so first of all, the business affairs were like, yeah, who's going to clear that, by the way? So that was one problem. But we weren't worried about that, obviously. Let the lawyers worry about that. But the idea was, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's basically collate some of the nicer, funny, heartwarming clips and just put them all together as a show and whack them out. And what happened was, TV vocabulary that we used was, we had an InVision host who did links into a clip. We saw the clip, back to the InVision host, who back-refed the clip and intro the next clip. And the effect it had was it sucked the life out of the show, because it was like, oh my God, don't tell us we're about to see a dog on a skateboard. Show us the dog on a skateboard. Back-ref, make some unfunny remark back-reffing the dog on the skateboard and then linking something else. It happened now. So it ran for one series, and they were partly because of the clearance reasons, but also because they just ran out of material. So then they ended up as, if you've got any funny clips, and then it ended up as being, America's funniest home videos. It was like, that's not what was pitched to us. My own feeling is that trying to transfer an online idea onto TV, it almost never works, because it's two different kind of mindsets. I think online stuff needs to be edgy. It mustn't feel slow or stodgy, and unfortunately TV has to be a little bit more kind of formulaic, and that's exactly what people who go onto the internet to look for ideas don't want. I'll tell you what, Channel 4 have had a lot of success with online. I think they're, in terms of UK broadcasters, they're the most advanced in understanding that the audience is transitioning towards online, and they're trying to use that to monetize it. I'll give you a good example. They've had they're called data engineers, people whose job it is to monetize audience subscriptions. So when you want to sign up for Channel 4 catch up, you have to give them your name, your age, your location, your gender, and some interests. So they already have an enormous wealth of information about people, and this is just for their free catch-up service. So you all you have to give them is some information about you, and then you can watch their shows and any other kind of online offerings. But what they've got from you is information that they can either sell to advertisers, and indeed, when I was in the UK, I was watching something online on my TV, and before the show came on, there was a Ben and Jerry's advert that said, "Hi, Asif, want to know about Ben and Jerry?" So they've got my name, and they put it into the advert. And I was, like, seasoned old cynic as I am, I was still kind of like, bloody hell, how have they got my name into that advert? And that they had. So Channel 4 are by far and away much more advanced than any of the other UK broadcasters in integrating and using online viewers' activity.
You've retreated to the quieter life, but you're the creator of TV BizTalk, which is an incredibly interesting read. Where can people find it?
I've never lost my love of writing. So I decided when I stopped kind of day-to-day TV work, I wanted to go back to writing. So I've started up 2 Substacks. One is a newsletter about the TV formats business, because the thing I liked as a commissioner, the thing I really liked is talking to people about ideas. So I thought it was quite important to give my boss as many options as possible. So I would made it my business to talk to as many people who had ideas and they wanted to come in and see me as possible. And most of the ideas were ridiculous, or just not workable, or not practical, or not right for ITV when I was working there at the time. But I still like talking to people about ideas. TV is an industry as well as being a creative endeavour. So people have to make money out of it and all that kind of stuff. But it does come from ideas. So the Substack that I write, which is asifzubairy.substack.com, talks about various different international formats, either through the years or ones that are similar. And the great thing is, of course, I've got the freedom to write whatever I want to write. So I can take the mickey out of things, or I don't take the mickey out of things, because if I don't like a format, I just won't write about it, because I'm not a reviewer. So I don't say, the thing about this format is it's crap. I just talk about formats either I like or that I think are unusual or different. And it started off with, I had heard that a German TV station had televised a book that presumed that Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, had just left her job. And she'd been in power for like years and years and years and done amazing things, I think. Anyway, this book proposed the theory that, just say, after she left office, she got involved in being a detective, a little bit like Agatha Christie's Miss Marple. And so I was like, go on. Anyway, so a book was written where Angela Merkel has retired with her husband and her bodyguard, and a murder happens, and she investigates it. And so she's Miss Merkel, and she's doing all this kind of like amateur sleuthing. And I just thought, what a ridiculous, amazing thing. So I wrote about that. And then I just started, then I was on a roll then and started finding similar formats from various different parts of the world, or formats, the evolution of formats. That is just, and it's the idea is that it's not supposed to be a thing for kind of professionals, although I have got quite a few professional subscribers, but it's something that anybody could read, hopefully, if nothing else, just for the style of writing, which is kind of supposed to be vaguely funny, and occasionally is.
Thanks again to Asif. Check out his Substack at asifzubairy.substack.com. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.